Hey guys, so this is a question from one of my subscribers that's asking me about my tie frames and what budding they are, and is tie really worth it? Is it just a fancy steel? So hopefully this camera works. I'm using my iPad because my iPhone camera, or my iPhone, is just the batteries are low. So let me just show you this firsthand exactly what this is. This is, and if it focuses there, this is the argon tubing, which is the tubing they use for the SL of the evergreen. And I guess it's kind of covered up with this little bag, evergreen SL, right there. And the next step up would have been the XX, but before it was called the SLX, and that's actually the tubing that's used on my 7th Sola. And if you could see that focusing in there, it's really faint. I don't know what's the deal with this. I'm trying to get it to focus anyway, but you could see it down here. That's called their Serous Tubing, and it's written right there. So the Cirrus Tubing is 7's highest in tubing for being 100% titanium. They have the mixed tubing that's carbon and tie, but this is the top level tubing, which they call multi-budded tubing. And this is one step down, which is double budded tubing. So what that means is at the weld joints, they are a little bit thicker because of the welding and the attachment, and you need the strength there. But then in the center of the tubing, it's thinner. Hence, it's like 1 times thickness here and 2 times thickness there, hence double budding. And that's the way I understand it. I'm obviously not a frame maker, and I've never been in a frame factory, although I'd like to go. And so I chose 7 because I know they do a heck of a lot of machining and manipulation and shaping and forming and go into all that. Now in hindsight, I probably would have got the higher end tubing on my evergreen as opposed to getting it on my single speed or on my mountain bike, just because there's going to be more time in the saddle, sitting on the saddle on the evergreen, as I'm just going on long rides. Whereas my mountain bike, I'm probably going on shorter rides, and I'm definitely not in the saddle as much, seeing it's a single speed. And when I'm climbing on that bike, I'm standing and climbing and just pedaling, and just don't really spend that much of my ride in the saddle. So that's just the way a single speed is. So let's look at that question as far as, is it worth it to get titanium, or is that just a fancy metal and you're spending a lot more? And I think you have to put that in perspective. Is it worth it to you? You know, I mean, I had a boss he was an Irish guy, or a Scottish Irish guy, and every year I bought him a really high-end bottle of scotch. And for him, that was great. Did he drink high-end scotch every day? Probably not, but it was having that around and having that was something that he valued. And I kind of look at a mountain bike frame as that. Are you the person that is a connoisseur and would value a high-end bike? And whether you ride it all the time or whether you choose just to ride it for special events, it's kind of up to you. I ride my bikes all the time, but some people, they don't have the schedule to, or they just don't, it's one of multiple hobbies, and maybe they just, or where they live, the weather permitting, they can only ride it some of the time. So, I mean, everybody has their own unique set of circumstances. So, is it really worth it? That's a personal question to you. Is it worth it? Titanium is a lifetime frame. It will not rust, it will not deteriorate, and it will be something that you can hand down to your kids. but is it worth it as far as, you know, that extra ride quality and extra value you feel, the lightness and the feel of titanium? Honestly, you know, most of your feel is coming from your tires and your rims and the rest of your setup, maybe your handlebars and your stem and your seat post and all of that taken into account. It's the sum of all parts that really makes that ride quality. And sure, if you build it from the base, from the frame with really nice feeling material like a butted tie frame or a butted steel frame, it's going to feel better than something that's just overbuilt and stiff. And obviously your carbon frames are not really butted, but they're wrapped and or they're hydrofoamed or something like that. Same with your aluminum. I personally like the feel of steel and I like the feel of tie. I've got carbon fiber bikes, and I just don't. I only have one actually, and that's a full suspension bike. And I just don't ride full suspension bikes anymore. I prefer to ride my hardtails, and I prefer to ride single speed for the most part. But then, obviously, for the long gravel rides, I'm not going to ride a Century on a single speed. It just doesn't make sense. But for doing these climbs up my local trails, which are shorter rides, I'm out there for 3-4 hours at the most. A mountain bike with a single gear works for me. And if it's a little bit longer, I'll take my gear bike, or if I know that the trail is just going to be overwhelmingly steep in a lot of sections, I would have my gear bike for that too. But it's really a personal choice, personal decision, as I was about to say. And do you want to, I guess, spend the cash and feel that you can justify that expense and, you know, make a commitment to, you know, getting the most out of that? Now, I feel like I've made that commitment. I've stayed very fit. I've stayed riding all the time. I don't think there's been 1 year for the past longer than that, 28 years. There hasn't been 1 year that I haven't got at least 100 rides in that year. And then obviously some years I get much more. Last year I think it was about 200 and something rides, and it was a little over 4,000 miles. This year I'm already almost at the 3,000 mile mark, and well over, I think I'm up to almost 200 rides. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, and so for me, I can justify it with that in a way. But I like it. I geek out on you know, the custom made, handmade frames, and I geek out on all the parts, and I enjoy it. So for me, I think yes, tie is a fancy steel, but it's really up to you. What do you want to, you know, consider when you are buying a bike, and is it worth it to you and with your own circumstances, and do you feel like you're going to get that value out of it? So you have to make that decision, and so I'll leave it at that. Is tie a better metal for frame, or is tie a better choice for bikes? The decision is up to you, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching.